Is a real Modoki La Nina weather pattern finally starting to evolve? I am Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, March 2nd.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
If you enjoy the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down the lower right-hand corner of the screen. If you have a comment or question, write it up down below. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with a $sign in it. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. Peter Carpenter, Coach Nate, Tim Caston, Skipper N, E. Slate, Our Predicament, Andrew Whitney, D. Modine, and Evolution Moto. Thank you all so much. I always appreciate your contributions. And now for something a little different. 2 weeks ago, I got a request from a band out of the UK called No Mo Co. They have put together an EP and they've taken, believe it or not, a Stormsurf video and put it into one of their songs. So here is just a little bit of it. You get the idea.
A bit at a time, a little bit more steady, but it's definitely growing, and it's coming our way.
And the search terms here are on the screen. You can find it on Spotify and YouTube. They did a pretty good job, so I just wanted to share that with you all. So thanks so much for tolerating that. And now, let's get to work. We're going to start by looking at significant wave heights around the planet. Starting in the North Pacific, we have a small gale with 20-foot seas aimed somewhat at Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. In the South Atlantic, pretty quiet pattern in control. But in the North Atlantic, we have a gale with 42-foot seas, actually 42.5 feet. The highest seas over this entire domain. There's a location. Max winds 56.3 knots in that location. In the South Atlantic, another gale with 24-foot seas. And in the Indian Ocean, a collection of some fetch producing seas, generally in the 22 to 23-foot range. But first, let's take a look at current conditions. We're going to look at some buoys, starting up off the Pacific Northwest coast. The Grays Harbor buoy, number 036. It's really off the Columbia River there. We're looking at all the energy that's in this buoy, all the way up from 33.3 second period, super long period energy, 1/10 of a foot of energy there. This is the height of swell energy in all the period bands. So what is that, like 5.9 feet at 14.3 seconds, 3.8 feet of energy at 9.9 seconds, and the whole way down to 5 second period, that'd just be like pure wind chop. Use some fancy math to pull out the spikes, like at 14 seconds, 9.9 seconds. And we have primary swell 6.8 feet at 14.2 seconds from 268 degrees, theoretically producing surf at 9.6 feet with some wind swell in the mix at 7.5 feet at 10.2 seconds from 270 degrees, theoretically adding 7.7 feet of additional wave height face energy into the mix. Looking at the chop height, 1.6 feet. This is just the energy from 2 to 5 seconds. You use it more as kind of a scale or a rough guide to how choppy and messed up things are. 1.6 feet, not too bad, but once you get up above 2.5 feet, things are pretty bad. Then we go down off of Northern California, the Point Reyes buoy, number 029, off of Point Reyes, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. You can see there's still a good amount of swell energy in the water. This big spike here at 15.4 seconds, another spike at 9 seconds. Primary swell, 9.4 feet at 14.7 seconds from 285 degrees, theoretically making surf 13.9 feet. That's about right. And secondary swell, 9.9 feet at 10 seconds from 278 degrees, adding another 9.9 feet of energy into the mix. Now, just for fun, we're going to take a look here. This is the calculated primary and secondary surf heights, and this was yesterday evening. You can see there was calculated waves at 25 and between 20 and 25 feet. Pretty inconsistent. The main swell was not pointed directly at San Francisco, more up at the Pacific Northwest. But when the sets came, they were indeed large, raw, and angry. Then we head down south to the Point Loma South Buoy off of San Diego, Buoy 191. Same bit of energy coming in, but attenuated by the Channel Islands. You see that there's this broad area of energy from 14 seconds up to 18 seconds and even some 22-second energy in the mix. Let's see what the algorithm does. Primary swell, 4.4 feet at 15 seconds from 276 degrees, theoretically making surf at 6.6 feet, with the secondary swell 2.3 feet at 18.4 seconds from 267 degrees, theoretically making surf at 4.3 feet. Again, these theoretical surf height calculations do not account for swell enhancing bathymetry, swell direction, all that sort of thing. It's just for a generic beach break. So if you know your spots well, you know some places will amplify that swell, other breaks will de-amplify it. And finally, we go over to the north shore of Oahu, the Waimea Bay Buoy number 106, a much more mellower swell pattern with this sort of background energy in the 11 to 12 second period range. Primary swell 2.9 feet at 11.7 seconds from 317 degrees, theoretically making surf 3.4 feet, and secondary swell 2.2 feet at 8.4 seconds from 267 degrees, adding about another 2 feet of some energy into the mix. Actually, the swell was bigger in the morning. It seems like it's been steadily falling through the day. A new swell is scheduled in, but is not showing at the buoy as of this recording time. So let's do a review of what's happened in the North Pacific for the past week. We're going back to Monday, February 24th. We'll put this into motion. A gale wound up here off of Oregon, producing 35-foot seas. That swell's come and gone. Another gale developed in the Gulf, producing 28 to 20, oh, there we go, actually 32-foot, 32-foot seas. That swell, of course, has come and gone as well. And then a stronger system developed on Wednesday, we'll call it northwest of Hawaii, with seas going to 46 feet. I think there was one high, 46 feet. There was actually a little buoy up here we dialed into. Had one reading of 48-foot seas. That swell has come and gone in Hawaii. That was the swell that created the surf on Saturday late afternoon in Northern California, and that is the same swell that is hitting Southern California as we speak now. To now, we're into Saturday. We could actually go back here a little bit. You can see this little tiny gale developed here off the Kuril Islands, pushing over the date line on Saturday, pretty much fading out as of this morning. This is a swell we're waiting to see when it arrives at the Hawaiian Islands. And I think that was more Monday than Sunday evening that it was supposed to arrive. Then we go down to the southern hemisphere. A gale developed east of New Zealand on Monday, getting much bigger or somewhat bigger on Tuesday, the 25th of February, with 32 building to 35-foot seas aimed off to the northeast. Swell is expected from that. A little bit of sideband energy maybe into Hawaii, but more so for Southern California about middle of this week. That gale eventually faded out and dissipated, and then a rather quiet pattern set up after that. We're into Saturday, and then finally Sunday, the 2nd of March. In the North Atlantic, same sort of pattern that's been going on all winter. Big low-pressure systems blowing up off the U.S. East Coast, heading northeast, bound for Ireland and up in that area. So you see there was one last Sunday. Another one started developing on Thursday into Friday with 47-foot seas, and then continued percolating there off of Ireland into Friday and Saturday, the 1st of March. And yet another system on Sunday with 42-foot seas hanging out there in the same area just west of Iceland. In the South Atlantic, a little bit of energy theoretically is trying to start building, but over the past week, a little gale, 30-some foot seas, 32-foot seas. It's really early in the season for anything. We're into Saturday here now, 33-foot seas. All this perhaps making some background energy bound for South Africa, but still pretty early in the season. And then finally to the Indian Ocean. Now, the tropical pattern is getting kind of interesting. You see one here pushing off of Western Australia. You see two other systems hanging around Madagascar here, not going anywhere, actually getting caught doing the recurve thing, but in the southern hemi, different than the northern hemi and what we're used to in the North Pacific, but still the same sort of pattern. Hopefully, one of these would actually get caught by the jet stream, blow up, and create some sort of a larger fetch, but right now we're not seeing any of that happening. All right, so let's go do a deep dive into the North Pacific. It is still winter in the North Pacific. We're going to start by looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales. When those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet to the south. You almost see something there. That helps create a counterclockwise flow aloft and also down at the ocean surface. That is the hallmark of low pressure. And of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Those winds get traction on the ocean surface and create seas. Those seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, the lesser period elements decay away, exposing longer period swell. And of course, swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. So we have a bit of a trough here in the northwestern Gulf of Alaska. Also notice this goes to the title of the video about is a Modoki La Nina pattern more normal than what we'd expect is finally starting to emerge? And I think the answer is yes. Notice backdoor trough off the U.S. West Coast. There's already been some rain into Northern California. More is expected. So, if you've been following the videos, you know we're in a Modoki La Nina pattern, and the short of it is cold water down here on the equator in this area. One would normally expect the jet to be ridging north because where the cold water is, that doesn't support evaporation. You get high pressure, typically north and south of that in the North and South Atlantic. The jet would ridge up to the north and then fall south over California. And we were hoping that's what was going to happen this whole winter. But no, that did not happen. We'll get into some of why that didn't happen later in the discussion. But for now, the pattern that was preventing that from happening appears to have broken down. And finally, during a Modoki La Nina pattern, you would expect backdoor troughs pushing down the California coast, creating rain. It appears that, at least for the moment, one of those is in play. Moving onshore Monday morning, notice now that the jets start splitting as we get into Monday night, early Tuesday, the 4th of March. That infers less energy in the jet stream, so it sort of decouples. Now look at this as we get into Tuesday. Here comes another trough falling south down the California coast. There you go. Pushing perhaps the whole way into Southern California. That'd be on Thursday. And then here we go as we get into Friday, almost Saturday, the 8th of March. Yet another trough setting up. The split point back here, exactly where one would expect it if there were high pressure in play over this area as a result of the cool Modoki La Nina waters here out by the date line. Anyway, this looks like finally a real Modoki La Nina pattern. Now, not great for surf production. Yeah, we were upset about the lack of rain into California, especially Southern California, but we did get surf, so, you know, you lose something, you gain something else. Now it looks like we're not going to get so much surf, but we are going to get more precip. Take what you can get. So let's get down to the surface. Surface level pressure, surface level winds, see what's up for the next week. Right now, kind of a weak pattern. You see some sort of a gale forecast developing Monday night, just west of the date line, pretty far to the north. 35 to 40 knot winds in that area, building, falling southeast. Now that will target Hawaii a little bit. And then the low continues a slow trek the whole way across the Pacific into Friday. 30 knot winds finally fading Friday. Another gale gets winding up off of the North Kuril Islands and Kamchatka on Saturday with 45 knot winds. This actually looks better than the model runs from this morning, hanging longer in the Northwest Pacific. So that bodes well for perhaps some swell for Hawaii, but pretty long ways away from the U.S. West Coast. That gale, actually, according to the latest model run, might even make it into the far northwestern Gulf. We'll call it the North Dateline region. So maybe some hope there. Let's go see what effect those winds have down at the ocean surface. Here we are, significant wave heights for the North Pacific. Putting this into motion, remnant energy from the gale. It's only 19-foot seas. That's good for maybe some wind swell. You see the swell front from it. This previously fell from the Kuril Islands in this direction. Swell inbound for Hawaii on, we'll call it sometime later Monday. Maybe some energy for the U.S. West Coast, but winds are supposed to pick up, so it'll probably be pretty well masked. Next gale gets winding up here off the Kuril Islands with 28-foot seas, building to 29 feet. Falling southeast a little bit, so maybe some swell for that. This is on Thursday, the 6th of March. Then finally making it over to the Gulf, but only with 20-foot seas, 22-foot seas. Now, the next gale winds up Saturday and Sunday with 35-foot seas over the North Dateline region, making it almost into the Western Gulf on 180 hours out, so Sunday a week from now. So maybe some swell from that, but certainly the pattern has shifted north, as you can see. Not as strong as what it was, not as prolific, but take what you can get. Looks like energy off the U.S. West Coast. Not swell energy, but probably more like wind and storm energy. Then we go to the southern hemi. The good news here, look at this, the ice anomaly, whatever that was that the models were showing. I actually went down and started digging around for satellite imagery, and NOAA actually had a good little thing, and they weren't showing any ice here. There was a bit of an iceberg down around in here, but it wasn't more than just about like what this says, 70 south. So it was some sort of model anomaly. That all seems to be resolved. Pushing through this now, we're just looking for any sort of meaningful fetch. Yes, we do see this gale here with 25-foot seas. Think that's going to be more targeting, we'll say, Peru up into Central America if it forms. It's kind of way out, not very strong. This other system falling southeast. No swell is expected to radiate north. So quiet for the southern hemi for the moment. Over to the North Atlantic, we have our big gale there west of Iceland. That's supposed to slide on out, disappear. Another one comes right behind it in the exact same place with 37-foot seas. But, I mean, a lot of this is going to be shadowed up into here. Certainly surf into, we'll say, most of Europe. Where are we now? We're Friday. Another gale forecast winding up off of Portugal on late Friday into Saturday, the 8th of March, with 33-foot seas, 33-foot seas. Certainly aimed at Morocco as well, so maybe some swell there. And another system tries to wind up here off the U.S. West Coast. I mean, U.S. East Coast. I think the issue is we're starting to move into spring. The pattern, if it's breaking down in the Pacific, it's going to break down in the Atlantic too, or do something different. So we'll have to see how this all plays out. In the South Atlantic, well, we have a little gale, maybe generating background, we'll call it background swell for South Africa, pushing Tuesday into Wednesday. Moving on, we're looking for something a little bit more powerful. There we go, but it's kind of falling southeast. Don't know how much swell South Africa would get from this one, 29-foot seas. And then we're out. Another one behind that. Whoops, there we go. Let's just go right there. So this suggests that some sort of a pattern is starting to emerge in the South Atlantic and probably into the Indian Ocean. Still very early in the season. March, yeah. More like April is when I'd expect to start seeing, legitimate swell-producing systems. And then finally, the Indian Ocean. Well, if the South Atlantic is waking up, you would think the Indian Ocean would too. And there we go, theoretically a gale with 38-foot seas forecast on Wednesday the 5th, building to 39 feet, traversing a good portion of the South Atlantic, our South Indian, the Indian Ocean. That would make surf for certainly the Mentawais and Bali down along Western Australia. That system fades out as we get into Friday. Is there anything more behind it? Notice the tropical systems. Now, I wouldn't trust the GFS model on a tropical system 156 hours out, but something to keep your eye on, especially if you're boating in that area. So here we go. We're almost 180 hours out. Two small systems, 28 and 27-foot seas, respectively. Something to look forward to. It does seem like the Southern Hemi is trying to wake up. Local wind forecast for Hawaii for the week. There's the Hawaiian Islands and South California, Central California. There's San Francisco Bay Area and North California. As we get to March, typically you would expect if springtime is starting to arrive, high pressure would start building, like right out there. That starts driving northwest winds down the coast. You get upwelling, the water temperatures plummet, and you end up with a lot of choppy surf conditions. So theoretically, actually that's exactly what we have right now, but it doesn't feel like a springtime pattern. This is more just like a sort of a bump in between the storms. You see high pressure fading out as we get into Monday. Northwest winds, 15, maybe 20 knots for North and Central California. Trades pretty light, 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. So we get into Tuesday, again, a pretty light wind pattern for California. Trades building. There's high pressure driving the trades, 20 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Wednesday, another little low pressure system here off the coast of California. Relatively light winds. Trades, though, solid 20 knots plus for the Hawaiian Islands. Thursday, the high starts pushing east. Low pressure starts moving in over the Sierra. Northwest winds, 20-25 knots for California. Trades, 20 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. So you get into Friday, things attenuate or mellow out a little bit. Northwest winds, 15 knots for California, and trades 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Saturday, low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska. Next front, backdoor front, pushing down the coast. Light wind regime. Trades 15 plus knots for the Hawaiian Islands. And we get one more in here Sunday. Here we go. Big low pressure moving into California. Backdoor front, likely bringing precipitation. High pressure behind it. Trades 20 knots for the Hawaiian Islands, and probably a southwest or a south wind mess for most of North and Central California. So we talked about precipitation. Here is California underneath all the precipitation. You can see snow in the Sierra. We'll get into Monday. That all fades out. But then the next system starts queuing up as we get into Tuesday. Doesn't quite make it. But then by Wednesday, you see moisture and precipitation building into Southern California, Central California, right to San Francisco. Snow for the Sierra Wednesday night into Thursday. This is a good amount of precipitation too, and more snow for the Sierra. And then that starts fading out on Friday. And I think there's one more queued up right behind that. You see it. There it is. We're into Sunday, and we're 180 hours out. More snow, more rain, making it down to at least Point Conception. My guess is it'll go further south if this materializes. Things are looking much, much better, but we have a lot of catching up to do because we haven't had meaningful precipitation for, a month? Something like that. The snow forecast dashboard finally has numbers on it in red and blue. Total accumulations for Palisades Tahoe, formerly Squaw Valley, looks like nearly 58 inches over the next 10 days. And Kirkwood even doing a little bit better, up at around 68, 69 inches. And Mammoth in on the action, though not quite as much, probably in the 26 to 27 inch category. And then back to Palisades Tahoe, looking at snow levels, freeze level. This is the base of Palisades Tahoe, pretty representative of most of the Lake Tahoe resorts at about 6,200 feet. The summit up at about 9,000 feet. Now, let's be real, Mammoth, their base elevation is like 8,500 or 8,800 feet and goes up to 11,000 feet. This is a pretty good representation of what's going on. So you see snow levels below the let's get oriented here. The red would be above freezing temperatures. The gray would be sleet, like 37 down to about 32 degrees. So right at the gray-white line, that's the 32-degree freeze line. But you see it's well below the base until we get into, what is that, Wednesday? Let's see, second, third, fourth. Yeah, Wednesday, you see the snow level goes up to maybe 7,000 feet in the morning, but then fades quickly back below the base, 5,000 feet or less beyond that. Then you do have another little warm-up period here on the 8th and the 9th with almost, if there is precipitation, but you can see kind of line up here, no additional precipitation during that window, so that's good. And then the next precipitation out on the 10th starts, and the freeze level is down below the base. So things looking much better for Tahoe than earlier in the season when there was rain down low. Now it looks like kind of more like a normal winter pattern, just in time. All right, surf spot forecast. This is primarily a surf video, so we'll go there. Starting up in the Columbia River near Portland, that area, you see larger seas, surf heights in the 12 feet range on Sunday, falling down to 3 feet on early Tuesday morning, back up to 13 feet or so as we get into Wednesday, and then falling from 10 feet late Wednesday into Thursday, back up to 8 to 9 feet on Saturday, and then falling down in the 5 to 6 foot range beyond that. Winds, yeah, blowing pretty hard on Tuesday, 35 knots, and then blowing pretty hard out of the south as we get into the weekend. Choose your spots wisely. Primary swell size, 8 feet at 13 seconds. As we get into Tuesday, up to 12 feet at 10 seconds. That's all just wind swell. But then settling out more in the 6 to 7 foot range at 13 seconds. New swell comes in 6.5 on Saturday, 6.5 feet at 14 seconds, and fading slowly from there. We go to North California. When you see these big dropouts, that means a lot of wind swell. And sure enough, looking at the winds northwest at 25 knots, just a blown out mess. That's even into Monday. Finally, as we get into Tuesday, the winds settle down. Surf heights really drop out, though. 4 feet, maybe 5 feet, probably all wind swell. You get into Thursday, again, you see that kind of mixed up pattern. That, too, is likely all just wind swell. And then we get into the weekend, surf heights in the 7 to 8 foot range, but you see the wind coming up from the south again at 30 plus knots. Looking at swell heights, again, you have that mixed up. Yeah, there's some swell in there, but it's really small. And then mixture of 5 and 6 feet at 13 seconds wind swell. That would be on Monday. Tuesday, things settle out 3 to 4 feet at 11 seconds. Then you get into Wednesday, and again, yeah, there's swell 2 feet at 15 seconds, but things are all jumping around, probably a whole bunch of wind mixed in there. And then as we finally get to the weekend, swell heights 4 to 5 feet at 14 seconds. We go down to San Diego, Southern California, surf heights 4 to 5 feet. But again, look at the winds, 30 knots out of the west. Supposedly this would be Monday morning. And then winds finally calm down. Instantly the swell drops. So that's a good sign that it's all wind swell. Winds come back up again Thursday and Friday. You get your wind, you're going to pay for it one way or another. Then finally surf heights in the 4 feet dropping to 3 feet. Range as we get into next weekend with light wind. Swell heights all over the place, 6 feet at 8 seconds. Now, there is some southern hemi swell supposed to be coming in here like Wednesday, Thursday. You see it 1.2 feet at 14 to 16 seconds sort of thing. The problem is there's supposed to be a whole bunch of wind. You can see it up here when all that occurs. Then finally, when the wind settles down in the weekend, we're talking 2 to 2.5 feet at 10 seconds, then 2 feet at 14 seconds on Sunday. Go over to Ireland, a bit more energy there. Surf heights in the 20 foot range Monday, 15 feet on Tuesday, 15 feet Wednesday. Then Thursday, things drop out into the more like the 5 foot range or so. Winds out of the south, you see it 20 knots, 25 knots sort of thing, and then finally settling down from Friday and beyond. Swell heights, 13 feet at 15 seconds, 11 feet at 15 seconds, 10 feet at 13 seconds. I mean, pretty much solid swell the whole way up through the work week, and then by the weekend, 3 feet at 8 to 9 seconds, so just wind swell. And then our final stop, Central Portugal. Not a whole lot going on until you get into Saturday, and then surf heights up into the 25 foot range, we'll say 20 foot plus the whole way through the weekend. Winds at that time, southwest, 20 to 30 knots, and onshore, probably not great. Let's go look at swell heights. You see not a whole lot happening until you get into the weekend. Then 19 feet at 14 seconds, 16 to 17 feet at 13 seconds. Certainly some energy in the water, but I think we're getting towards the latter part of winter now. So let's move on and take a look at the long-term outlook. We're going to examine pretty deeply the two major weather oscillations that affect weather, swell, and the oceans long term. They are the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. We're going to start talking about the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. As you all know, there are two phases to it, the active phase and the inactive phase. They rotate around the planet west-east. One, the active phase on one side of the planet, the inactive phase on the other side. They rotate opposite each other west to east around the equator. The active phase is our friend. It is like a low-pressure system. It takes warm, moist air down the ocean's surface, lifts it aloft. That warm, moist air hits the jet stream. It energizes the jet stream. A stronger jet stream makes for troughs and energetic troughs, and those troughs, one, create storms and feed gale development. They also create weather, rain, and snow. The inactive phase, exact opposite. It's like a high-pressure system. It creates downward falling air, cuts off the flow of moisture up into the jet stream. The jet stream gets weaker. It splits, just like what we saw occurring over the North Pacific, and then you don't have support for storm development and or precipitation, at least in some locations. All right, so now also active phase of the MJO, because it's a low pressure system and trades are generated by high pressure systems. So the active phase of the MJO dampens trade winds. The inactive phase of the MJO feeds trade winds. So we can get a sense of what's going on in the Pacific based on what's going on with the trades. We can infer that. So this is data from the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys strung across the Pacific. This is the East Pacific. This is the West Pacific here. There's New Guinea, the date line right there. That's the equator. We're just looking at the arrows. The arrows show us the relative 5-day average wind speed. So you see trades out of the east, pretty weak over in the East Pacific, and the Central Pacific starting to build, and in the far West Pacific where things really matter, pretty strong trades suggesting inactive phase of the MJO. But it's not the actual wind speeds that matter. It is the anomalies, the difference from normal for any part of the ocean for this time of year. So you get into the East Pacific here, yeah, there still are trades, but they're really weak. The net result is it's the equivalent of a reversal of trades. And this is exactly what you want for building warm water and for negating the effects of La Nina. You get over to the Central Pacific, trades are pretty much neutral. You don't see any arrows. Then you get into the West Pacific and you see the arrows getting longer and longer as you get further west. So inactive phase probably over here, active phase somewhere over here. Let's go look at the forecast for the next 14 days. All right, 850 millibars zonal wind anomalies for the whole planet, all right? The 180, that is the date line. So that's the Pacific. The far West Pacific starts at 125 east, so right about there. And the main area that really matters in terms of feeding energy into the jet stream is the West Pacific. I call it the Kelvin wave generation area. So the blues, purples, easterly anomalies, reds, westerly anomalies. So here is today. So how do we decode all this? Well, you can see these strong easterly anomalies that are over the date line. They faded back in February up to about maybe a week ago. And you see westerly anomalies started building south of California, 120 west. This was probably and you see westerly anomalies up here. This is probably the active phase of the MJO pushing across the Pacific right in that area. Now you see building easterly anomalies forecast over the Kelvin wave generation area starting 2 days from now, strong status and in control. Now, one thing, see westerly anomalies here, just like they were here. Part of what the pattern has been this entire year has been super strong westerly anomalies right at the entrance to the Kelvin wave generation area, the West Pacific. So the jet stream is flowing from west to east. It hits these westerly anomalies, gets supercharged, and was able to make good progress across the Pacific before it split. And it was splitting literally just like, 800 miles off of California. Okay, and that's what was blocking all the precipitation coming into California. It was great for making storm development out over the date line in north of Hawaii, but did nothing for rainfall. Now you see the westerly anomalies all build up here south of California. The suspicion is that is going to help support rainfall development for at least the next 2 weeks. Once you get some of this momentum going, it just doesn't turn off on a dime. And the models do show some westerly anomalies trying to rebuild here over the maritime continent, but very fragmented. And I get the sense it's not going to rebuild like it was. The suspicion is, therefore, the jet will continue to be split over the date line in that area, and then it'll consolidate south of or as it pushes into California, supporting those backdoor troughs and precipitation for at least 2 weeks and maybe longer. Let's go dig a little deeper. Outgoing long wave radiation, OLR, just fancy words for, is there more clouds than normal or not? That is, if there's more clouds, sunlight can't reflect off the ocean surface, and you get these blue shades, negative anomalies, less sunlight bouncing off the ocean. If you see the reds, well, that means you have clear skies, no clouds, the sun's bouncing off the ocean, you get a lot of outgoing long wave radiation reflecting off the ocean. That roughly means the inactive phase of the MJO. So as of right now, and let's get oriented here, okay? The equator runs right across here, South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea there, Australia, date line right there. Inactive phase of the MJO over the maritime continent. This is the statistic model. You see it holding 5 days from now, continuing, still filling the Kelvin wave generation area 10 days from now, and then 2 weeks from now, inactive phase fading out with the active phase trying to build here over the maritime continent. Now, the dynamic model paints a much different pattern with the inactive phase holding for the next 2 weeks and maybe even longer. This would support, again, the backdoor trough pattern that we think is setting up relative to California. This would support that as well because this is effectively high pressure. So the jet stream would be ridging north up this way and then falling south, California roughly up there. So you get this kind of a wave pattern, and that would support precipitation, 5 days, 10 days, 15 days. And you see there's probably another 2 weeks worth of inactive phase beyond that. It typically takes the inactive phase anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to make its transit across the Pacific. The longer it holds in the West Pacific, the greater the odds for precipitation into California. Let's go look at phase diagrams. Here's a drill down, same two models, statistic model here, dynamic model here. How do you read this chart? Well, this just tracks where the active phase of the MJO is. It moves from west to east, from the Indian Ocean to the maritime continent, over the West Pacific, to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot right there is where the active phase is right now. So somewhere East Africa, almost entering into the Indian Ocean. And here is 1, 2, 3 different forecast tracks, all of it basically having, and each dot is a day. So 2 weeks out, active phase of the MJO over the Indian Ocean. The further the dots are away from the circle, the stronger the active phase is. So a weak active phase, weak to modest active phase over the Indian Ocean. The dynamic model, the GEFS model, shows the active phase getting pretty strong over the West Indian Ocean, maybe a week from now, but then it too fades, pretty much doing the same thing as the statistic model. Another upper level model, this is a statistic model. Again, it's like outgoing long wave radiation. The oranges, dry air, a lot of sunlight reflectivity, inactive phase of the MJO. The greens, wet air, active phase of the MJO. So this shows, and this goes out 8 different panels, 5 days of panels. It goes out 40 days. There's South America running down there, Australia and New Guinea right over in this area. The 0 is the equator on each of these panels. Date line roughly right down here. So you see inactive phase in control for at least till about March 17th. Now, I think we saw it on the previous statistic model. This is running a lot faster than the dynamic model. And this has the active phase pushing into the West Pacific by mid-March and in control pretty much the whole way into the end of March, and then a new inactive phase over the West Pacific as we get into April. But I think that is way too aggressive. Let's keep going. Here is the CFS model. It goes out a month. The east-west component of the wind, for the whole planet. The blues, easterly anomalies, roughly the inactive phase. The reds, westerly anomalies, the active phase. But this actually shows the MJO, the solid or the black contour. So, in fact, I'm going to slide this up just a little bit so you can see there's you get a little bit better idea. The black line, active phase of the MJO, the dotted black contour, inactive phase of the MJO. So you see active phase, this is back in December. See the strong westerly anomalies over the maritime continent. In January, inactive phase pushed across, but still the westerly anomalies persisted into February. They finally broke up with this active phase that made its way across the Pacific. We got surf from that. That's over now. Here is the inactive phase or easterly anomalies preceding the actual inactive phase. Now this shows westerly anomalies, again, trying to build over in the far west Pacific, but not till the end of March. I think we got 1, 2, at least 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks before, if these westerly anomalies develop, they start doing that thing and pulling the jet stream back together. Be great for surf production, but that would maybe be where our snow and liquid precipitation pattern starts weakening. Then finally, the CFS model going out 3 months. I'm following this very closely. Past performance down here. You can see the date line running right up the middle. The blues, easterly anomalies, the yellows, westerly anomalies. Kelvin wave generation or the far west Pacific starts about 125 east, so right there. You can see back, past performance here, the forecast up here. Here was all these big westerly anomalies that persisted into February 14th over the maritime continent, with easterly anomalies over the date line. Pretty much classic Modoki La Nina pattern, but these westerly anomalies were fueling the jet stream, making it stronger than normal. And so it didn't push to the north over the date line, and it wasn't able to make those backdoor troughs pushing into California. So here's where we are today. Easterly anomalies in control. No real westerly anomalies over the far west Pacific. And what the really good news, same as last week, easterly anomalies holding till about, it was March 26th or 28th. Now it looks like about maybe March 29th, something like that. And then the easterly anomalies collapse completely. Westerly anomalies, we'll call them neutral anomalies, take over. And then westerly anomalies take over the entirety of most of the West Pacific starting, we'll say, April 11th and beyond. This looks like the complete collapse of La Nina starting somewhere right around here. Let's overlay the MJO, see if we're close. Right, there's our last active phase of the MJO, which created swell, long string of swell. Certainly at Pipeline, you all read about it, just nonstop. Was it 2 weeks of just steady surf? And then some big surf up into Northern California. Now, inactive phase coming in, the easterly anomalies in control. Maybe that will set up our backdoor trough pattern. And then you see, now this is really interesting. You see how relatively short the active phases have been during La Nina. Inactive phases dominate, the active phases are weaker. During El Nino, the active phases dominate and the inactive phases are less dominant. Look at the duration of this active phase pushing across the Pacific, starting, it's into the far west Pacific on, we'll say, March 15th, and in some fashion holding over the date line till almost the end of May. This looks like a major pattern shift. Let's see if it is. Let's overlay the low pass filter. Here we go. All right, the solid black contour here, low pressure bias. This would be your La Nina signal, your El Nino signal if it were in the Pacific, but it's over the maritime continent. And that is to hold the dotted contour, high pressure bias, right smack over the date line, classic La Nina kind of pattern with 1, 2, 3 contour lines, and they never even really started developing until December. By typically mid-December, La Nina typically is fading, so this is a very late developing La Nina. Anyway, the point is the third contour is to fade April 11th, so that's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks out. Then the second contour fading in the beginning of May, And then notice the high pressure bias completely moving east of the date line as we get into mid-May, the low pressure bias moving into the Pacific. This suggests a return to a neutral ENSO type pattern as we get into May. Pretty normal time for that change, and it would be most welcome. All right, what's going on down in the ocean? Because that also helps us understand what's going on with El Nino and La Nina. We've moved past the MJO portion of the discussion. We're now moving into the ENSO portion. We're looking at data from the TAO buoy array, those series of buoys strung across the equator. You can actually see these are these X's here. These are the anchor lines. The X's are actual sensors strung on down the anchor lines of the buoys. The sensors record temperature data, and you can get a profile of where warm and cold water are in the Pacific. You see the 29-degree isotherm, 29 degrees centigrade, that's very warm water, not even present. 28-degree isotherm, about where it was last week at 172 east. The 24-degree isotherm, exactly as it was last week. This shows warmer water in the west, much thinner depth of warm water in the east, presumably because trades are stronger here. Now, it's not the actual water temperatures that matter. It is the anomaly, the difference from normal for this time of the year. You see warm water in the west, cool anomalies, 1, 2, 3 degrees in a couple of pockets. This is your La Nina signature. And interesting, the warm water that was here is not as warm as it was, at least according to this. But notice there are no X's up in here. And I think there's a bunch of sensors missing here, so they're not quite picking up on what's going on. So let's go look at one other set of data. Here's another set of data. It uses the exact same TAO buoy array data, but it also adds in satellite data to sort of map out what's going on subsurface, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you see warm water, a lot of warm water encroaching to about 160 west. Cool water, but if I had the animation going, you'd see this is not as strong. It's more sort of built out, but it's losing intensity, getting weaker, suggesting already the demise of La Nina. The warm water here in the far East Pacific, not as pronounced as it was in days and weeks past. So this is the satellite data, the Pentad sea level anomalies used in the previous chart. Let's get ourselves oriented. Chile, Peru, that's the equator right there. So Ecuador would be there. Central America, date line right there. There's New Guinea. All right, this is not showing temperatures. This is showing the height of the sphere of the ocean. If you have cold water at depth, cold water contracts. If it's contracting, you're going to get a divot on the ocean surface. Likewise, if you have warm water at depth, it displaces the water above it up, and you get a bump on the ocean surface. So you see here, these are centimeter anomalies, positive, 15 centimeters above normal, 20 centimeters, suggesting lots of warm water at depth, pushing up the sphere of the ocean. Likewise, you have colder, or one can infer negative anomalies, less height in the sphere, or negative anomalies down 10 centimeters, 15, almost 20 centimeters. Now, the thing here is, and the Galapagos right there, this is just barely below normal over in this area, and it's only 5 degrees north and south of the equator that really matter. The density of the negative anomalies is getting weaker, suggesting the effect of La Nina is getting weaker in the ocean. In fact, you can see it here, the upper ocean heat anomalies. This is the upper 300 meters of the ocean. This is the West Pacific here, the East Pacific here. You can see the pulses of La Nina driven by the inactive phase of the MJO. That would be stronger than normal trades, creating upwelling here. This would be, 120 west, that's south of California. So one pulse, 2 pulse, another 3, 4. Actually, there was one even earlier than this. Here's the last big cool pulse. Notice the buildup of warm water over here in the West Pacific. And notice this last pulse really down to not a whole lot in the past week. And I suspect this is probably the last pulse of La Nina for this season, and then it's just going to fade out. Then we go to the sea surface temperatures. That was subsurface. What's happening on the ocean surface is really what matters, because it is the temperatures at the ocean surface that support evaporation if temperatures are warmer, or suppress evaporation if temperatures are cooler. So South America, Central America, Hawaii, Australia, New Guinea, the equator right there, date line right there. There is your Modoki La Nina. Normally a real La Nina would be all over in here. In fact, look at this. Building warm temperatures off Ecuador the whole way out to 140 west. This almost looks like a building El Nino. Now it's not. I'm not even going to try to sit there and hype that or clickbait you with that sort of thing. That's not true. But temperatures are in fact warming dramatically. They were at 120. That was the westernmost extent. Then to 130, and now we're to 140, if not 145. This suggests the volume of cool water here associated with the Modoki La Nina is getting smaller while warmer temperatures build in the east. This is a very, very good sign. Now here's the sea surface trend for the past 7 days. South America, Central America, Australia, New Guinea, the equator right there, the date line right there. Warming temperatures from 150 west the whole way to Ecuador, a little bit of a neutral pattern here just west of the Galapagos, but this is part of an ongoing trend that's been going on, just steadily warming temperatures in this area. This is typically where La Nina should be strongest, and we're not even close to that. In fact, La Nina is coolest out in here. I don't see any real cooling. If anything, there's more spotty warming than there is cooling, suggesting, again, La Nina is fading. This is the trend for in the Nino 1.2 region, the area right there by Ecuador and Peru. Really good news here. Look at the trend since, later part of January when temperatures were down 1 degree below normal. We're up to plus 1 degree and 446 thousandths of a degree, basically 1.5 degrees above normal here in the Nino 1.2 region. Now, again, this is not the official El Nino monitoring region, but it's sort of a harbinger of what's to come. It suggests a steady warming pattern. We go to the Nino 3.4 index, which is the official El Nino monitoring region, out on the equator from a point south of California out to the date line. You see the same pattern developing, warming. Today, 1/4 degree below normal, 247 thousandths of a degree. Let's get ourselves oriented here. From a 1/2 degree below normal to a 1/2 degree above normal is considered ENSO neutral, neither La Nina nor El Nino. Now, we've only been there for 1, 2, I'll be generous, give it 3 days. So that is not a real trend. And we've been between a 1/2 degree to 1 degree. That would be weak La Nina, or 1 to 1.5 degree is moderate La Nina. So somewhere right on the border between weak to moderate La Nina for pretty much all winter. Finally, now though, it looks like we're moving. We've actually been in a good trend here since about the 25th of January. So a month, maybe 5 weeks, heading in the right direction. Sea surface temperature trend for the week. This is official corrected data. Last week we have is February 19th. Oh, and this is Nino 1, Nino 3, Nino 3.4, Nino 4. This is the official area right now, or the official El Nino monitoring area, 1/3 of a degree below normal. And we were that the week before. You see, we were much cooler around Christmas, 1 degree. So what's all in all, this still looks like moderate, weak to moderate La Nina. And as of the past 2 weeks, at least according to this data, we're not even in La Nina anymore. But ultimately, it is the atmosphere that decides whether we're in La Nina or not. That's what affects our precipitation, our rain, our storm production, our surf, all that. So we look at the difference in pressure between Tahiti and the Pacific, Darwin over the Indian Ocean. When pressure is lower in Tahiti, the index goes negative. Well, we're positive, but just barely, 1.53. And where have we been the past week or so? Well, You can see the effects of the MJO. This looks like the inactive in MJO, very strong positive. Then the active phase of the MJO, the index goes negative. Now we're somewhere in neutral land, maybe slowly working our way back to a La Nina pattern of some kind, but 1.53, not bad. 30-day average takes the noise out of it, 6.8, plus 6.8. Where were we a month ago? 3, we went up to 13.68. Now we're back down. So still generally positive. The 90-day average rounded out even more. This is your La Nina, El Nino indicator, plus 6.19. Where were we a month ago? 6.82. So basically holding somewhere in weak La Nina pattern. Let's go take a look at a graph of this data. Here we go, 30-day moving SOI graphed out. Here we are today somewhere. The index is variable. This is a Bureau of Meteorology. The other data was, 0.6. This is showing about 0.5. But you can see a trend line upwards since December 2023 as La Nina tried to take hold. But look at this. Neutral is +7 to -7. We've been in effectively averaging in the neutral territory up to right about somewhere now where we're borderline in La Nina. But all the data we're looking at suggests the underpinnings of La Nina are falling apart. Water is warming. My guess is the atmosphere will change too. This is an atmospheric index. It will lag behind, but you'll start seeing this at some point in the next 2 months starting to fall more solidly into neutral territory. What is the forecast for sea surface temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region for the coming weeks and months? We look at that from the CFS version 2 model, forecast for Nino 3.4 sea surface temperature anomalies. Well, you see in January we were colder, down about 0.7 a degree. February, this is mid-January. Mid-February, we're at like -0.4. I'm sorry, February, yeah, right there, -0.3. As we get into March, which we have, about 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks to get mid-March, about 2 weeks, value -0.25. Again, neutral is half degree below to half a degree above. So basically neutral from now onward. And as we get into the summer, literally moving to 0, maybe up to 0.2 of a degree above normal. But again, that's effectively neutral. This still looks like we are moving into ENSO neutral and will be actually in a real neutral pattern as we get into fall. What was that, 8 or 9 months from now? So let's zoom back out. Let's get some perspective here. What's happening right now? Looks like rainfall is going to start building relative to California, and that is a major plus. Yeah, not so much surf now, but rainfall and snow. We'll take it. We need it. We got to prepare for the summer. More water in the reservoirs, the better. Anything we can do to dampen fire danger. So we'll take it. And if we get a little fun in the mountains with the snow, skiing, snowboarding, whatever you like to do out, that would be awesome too. And it looks like for at least the next 2 weeks, that's going to be the pattern. I'm thinking maybe even the next 3 or 4 weeks. So make your plans accordingly. And all this seems to be focused pretty well on California as compared to the Pacific Northwest. Surf-wise, maybe not so much happening, but as we get into the end of March, early April, westerly anomalies forecast building over the dateline completely, La Nina collapsing. Maybe we'll actually get some late season North Pacific swell. That's really a Hail Mary kind of projection, but maybe, just maybe, that'll happen. So all hope is not lost. Also, the active phase of the MJO and westerly anomalies over the dateline, if they don't manifest in the North Pacific, maybe that will help jumpstart the Southern Hemi season. So we can win either way. But for right now, rain, snow looks to be the forecast. And that's a good thing. Looking further out, looks like we're moving to ENSO neutral. So next year might be the first neutral ENSO run we've had in I don't know, 10 years. I don't know. I have to actually go. Maybe some of you can go dig it out. I'd have to go look through the archives, but I think it's been quite a while. We've been whipsawing back and forth between strong La Nina and then short periods of El Nino. So a neutral year would be a really good thing. All right. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you have a question or comment, write it up down below. If you are not subscribed, please click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, it's always much appreciated. Hit the super thanks button down below. The heart with the $sign in it. With that, we are done for this week. We will do it again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks so much for sticking around and spending this hour with us, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks.